I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Bibliospran, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today's video will be another book review, and this is for one of my most anticipated release of this year. Yes, today's video will be a book review, a spoiler-free book review of 11th Cycle by Kian Ardalan. And I will get started with my review immediately. 11th Cycle is one of the best books that I've read. Berserk and Dark Souls fans, this epic page-turning grimdark fantasy novel is written for us. 11th Cycle is due to be published in less than a month from now, but I first stumbled upon this in December 2021 when Kian Ardalan shared the cover art illustrated by Nino Is and designed by Sean King on his Twitter account. Since then, I was instantly intrigued, and this book was included into my list of most anticipated novels with ease. Even though I haven't read anything by the author yet back then, and yes, this is indeed the first time I read anything by Kian Ardalan, but seeing the cover art and the main inspirations behind this novel was more than enough to seal the deal for me. And ever since I got the advanced reading copy about 2 months ago, I have been itching to read this novel, but decided to hold it off until this month because my instinct says I would love this one, and I wanted to start my reading year with terrific books. Fortunately, despite my high expectations, 11th Cycle is undoubtedly an excellent character-driven epic grimdark fantasy novel. Before I proceed with my review, I need to mention that this book is not for the faint of heart. The author has included content warnings at the beginning of the book, and I will repeat that at the end of this review. I do not think any of the content warning means spoilers, but if you are someone who wants to be completely surprised entering into this book, feel free to skip the content warnings at the end of this review. Now it's time for me to share my thoughts regarding this book. 11th Cycle is the first out of 4, possibly 5 books in the Mistland series by Kian Ardalan. As some of you may know already, this is a novel inspired by Kentaro Miura's Berserk manga series and also From Software Games' Soulsborne franchise, specifically in the case of this book, the Dark Souls trilogy. It has been 1,000 years since the last Sith abandoned their duty. The mists are closing in, and finally, as the morning bell tolls, a new Sith to purge the evil is born. But is it too late? The blood eats away at mortals. The witnesses pray so that they may not turn into one of the forgotten, and the constricting mist infect the lands with fear. But there is more to this tale than just the elders and their seeds. 4 mortals will have a part to play in Minetria's fate. A farmer girl with only love in her eyes, a warrior born to the life of a refugee, a highborn stuck between the realm of gods and men, and a woman running into the front lines and away from home. I absolutely loved 11th Cycle. A great Soulsborne, this includes Sekiro Shadow Die Twice and also Elden Ring. A great Soulsborne-inspired fantasy novels, surprisingly and also understandably, are not as common as you might think. Countless stories could be created through being inspired by the video game franchise, but it is far from being an easy task to do right. The Soulsborne franchise is often well known for its complex and intimidating storyline and also difficulty. Non-players of Soulsborne games tend to think that we gamers are masochists when we constantly play, rage, and love playing these challenging video games. But that is not truly the case. These games teach you to be careful, do not play carelessly. They teach you that repetition and learning are keys to success. They teach you to always pay attention to your surroundings. More importantly, these games teach you that you can overcome adversities in your life through perseverance and dedication. That high-level satisfaction feeling you get when you overcome difficult bosses that took you hours to beat is utterly rewarding and missing from so many games lately. And my point is this: there are many things to love in these games. A single review won't be enough to cover the details of it. At the same time, 11th Cycle managed to capture many of them, including one of the main essence of the recurring themes of the Dark Souls games: perseverance in the face of injustice and a bleeding world. Themes aside, it is hard to translate what made the Soulsborne franchise so beloved into a novel. The main story in Dark Souls is relatively pretty straightforward. However, understanding every character's background, lore, and details of these games that enrich the quality of the narrative and world building of the series will require deep dedication and multiple playthroughs. Fragmented storytelling is a staple aspect of the franchise. So, is 11th Cycle hard to understand? No, far from it. Rest assured, the majority of the main story in 11th Cycle is so much more accessible than its inspirations, Dark Souls. And I totally appreciate this. The world building and the secrets, however, are another topic, and I will talk about this later. In a similar way to Dark Souls games, Ardalan made sure the main plot progression in 11th Cycle is never difficult to understand. I think this is incredibly important. Video games and novels are two different mediums. You cannot fully adapt or replicate what worked in video games to novels. And I think that is the mistake of the graphic novel adaptations of Dark Souls and Bloodborne. They made everything so cryptic, even edgy, reliant on fanservice, that the adaptations became incomprehensible. If or when we managed to solve the riddle or their dialogues, there was no feeling of satisfaction. But that is not the case with Ardalan. Ardalan successfully transported the essential elements that made the Dark Souls trilogy so engrossing, so irresistible, and rewarding into novel format, while also making sure that the story he tells here is his own creation. The narrative never lets its hook off me, and I ended up finishing this incredible 800 pages novel in 4 days. I could have read it faster, but I also did not want to because my time with 11th Cycle would end too soon. I read this at an astonishing pace of 200 pages per day, and believe me, with how busy my life is now, reading at this pace seldom happens. But the act of putting this book down just felt wrong. Ardalan's beautiful, sometimes lyrical, and yet accessible prose compels me non-stop. And the accessibility does not mean the world and the lore of the novel fail to match the epic scope of the world building and lore contained in the Dark Souls games. Yes, we need to talk about the world building. More than usual, I am entering this book more critically about its world building. Ardalan was brave enough to call this book a love letter to Berserk and Dark Souls after all. I believe with these two franchises, a certain level of quality has to be met, and Ardalan confronted them head-on straight. It was tough for me to find issues with the in-depth lore of 11th Cycle. The immersive misty world of Minetria that is brimming with history and secrets felt like this could totally be the world that From Software has created for their games. The all-powerful Elder King in Mount Morinar oversees the world of Minetria with their elder beings. There were beings, seeds, and races birthed from each cycle, such as Zelzidan of the Light, Muria the Protector as the great giant with a hammer that conjured earthquakes, and Kailu the Silent that brought forth the Age of Dragons. Or maybe Akar, a race born from the end of the 6th cycle, gifted with monstrous strength, giant flying stingray like in Demon Souls, and so many more. Then there is also the giant Elder Blacksmith bound to his eternal forge, charged with forging weapons for the gods. I will let Ardalan's description of the Elder Blacksmith speaks for itself regarding the vivid quality of his prose. The blacksmith awaited, his presence clouded by the encompassing heat. He was known as an elder of legend who fashioned countless artifacts. Some were said to have found their way to the hand of seeds, while others were given to the world of Minetria, waiting to be found once more. At first glance, I would have thought this being was a product of nature, a serendipitous result of rock formations and volcanic discharge that just so happened to form some likeness to man. But then this force of nature moved and struck a veined hammer to anvil, evoking sparks like a primordial god. The giant was made entirely out of molten rock, where glowing fire flowed between the cracks of the shard sediment flesh. We were to the being what ants were to us, as a simple press of the glowing thumb could completely crush us. The blacksmith was suspended in air, their lower half replaced by a spherical solid boulder. Hook chains spread from its corners and were mounted into the stone dome. Their beard was made of flame, like a perpetually burning nest that birthed amber. Their head was entirely encased by a mold of rock, except for the eyes that pierced out like smoldering coals. The elder had 4 arms, 2 on either side, entirely of molded earth with cracks of lava running through. The existence of the blacksmith will have significance to Dark Souls fans. I do believe Soulsborne lore masters like Vati Vidya read this book. Vati, if you're watching this somehow, would have a blast dissecting and analyzing the intricacies and mysteries of the world in 11th Cycle. Recent player of Elden Ring might think 11th Cycle is inspired by Elden Ring as well. With the existence of Elder Kings, Elder Gods, the one in the cover art, and the unstoppable rod, it is understandable why readers or gamers might think that. However, Elden Ring was not in the equation when this book was written. This is all pure coincidence, but also fitting to themes of decay and corruption often encountered in Soulsborne games. 11th Cycle is rich with details and lore, and we haven't even dissected every single details of it yet. What we attain from the epigraphs, consider this as the item description in Dark Souls or Soulsborne games, were enough to conjure a myriad of possibilities for the author and also reader to explore and imagine. For example, if Ardalan ever decides to explore the past seeds and the past cycles as a series, he could, and we are currently at the 11th cycle. And I believe it would work magnificently. That's how rich the world building in 11th cycle is. At this moment, talking in detail about the world building in 11th cycle alone would require at least one dedicated video. Once more books in the series are published, I think a series of videos exploring the lore and secrets in Mistland series are in order. My mind currently is still trying to connect all the dots and secrets in the epigraph and the narrative, and I don't think I will succeed until I do at least one more reread of the book, which I will definitely do in the future. I have given my seal of approval to the intricate world building, Dark Souls inspirations, and powerful themes, but I have not actually discussed the aspect that elevated 11th Cycle to becoming one of my favorite books of all time: the characterizations. The character work in 11th Cycle is superbly written, and whether you have played Dark Souls or not, as long that you are a fan of character-driven grimdark fantasy, 11th Cycle is a must-read. The four main POV characters, Dalila, Nora, Chroma, and Erefiel Numaya, have their chapters told in a first-person perspective. And despite this, Ardalan nailed their voice distinction and personality for these four main characters so damn well. On top of that, we also have the POV chapters of the 11th seed, Ievarus themselves, written in a third-person perspective. I feel like I have gotten to really know these characters as real people. Two main characters here are inspired by two characters from Berserk by Kentaro Miura. One is inspired by Casca, and the other is loosely inspired by Griffith. And I love all these characters. I know I have mentioned in this review that this is a grimdark fantasy novel, and as far as graphic content and brutal theme goes, it truly belongs in the subgenre. I have no doubt many readers will agree with me on that. But the main POV characters, none of them actually fall into the morally grey or villainous main characters often encountered in grimdark fantasy. These characters are all good people, but what the main characters have to deal with, yes, absolutely, yes. It is without a shadow of a doubt belongs in the grimdark subgenre. The world in 11th Cycle is incredibly merciless. When I thought things would not get any worse, they did. The physical and mental damage done to one of the main characters in this novel is one of the most messed up and fatal devastation inflicted toward a main character I have ever read, out of all storytelling mediums. It was crushing. Once again, if you are not sure about this, please make sure to check the content warning I include at the end of this review. Honestly, I can't even tell you the one chapter to avoid reading if you want to experience the book without reading the graphic scene. These scenes were rough, uncomfortable, and disturbing to read, as they were intended to be. But whether you are okay with the existence of these scenes in this book or not, they were included to highlight a contrast in humanity. They showcase darkness and light, how far humans will succumb, and how far unrelenting determination a human can unleash, for better or worse. Most importantly, I believe everything is done to spotlight just how bright and mighty a tiny spark of hope in the cage of overwhelming darkness. And to me, the payoff is so rewarding. At the end of the day, 11th Cycle is an exceptional character-focused grimdark fantasy novel about hope, will, rage, fear, compassion, and humanity. It has powerful themes and narrative, masterful characterizations, beautifully vivid yet accessible prose, meticulous world building with a plethora of mysteries, and tension-packed, explosive action sequences as if they were penned by an artist with a scarlet ink. The story is dark and brutal, the emotions that the empathizing characters felt were palpable, and it does not shy away from revealing the light and darkness of humanity to its maximum effect. Fans of Dark Souls, Berserk, and epic grimdark fantasy, the breathtaking Dark Souls-inspired novel we've been waiting for is finally here. Although this year has only just begun, I am confident and thrilled in saying that 11th Cycle is an early contender for my favorite book of the year. It is easily one of my favorite books of all time now. I will reread 11th Cycle someday to investigate the details of the lore. Maybe when the second book, Forgotten Seed, which I needed yesterday, is ready to be published. But in the meantime, pre-order this book if you are a fan of epic grimdark fantasy or dark fantasy, whatever you want to call it, Berserk by Kentaro Miura, and Dark Souls. I don't see the possibility of you not liking this book if you are a fan of these three. Experience 11th Cycle, Praise the Sun, Good Hunter. Art impacts different people in different ways. The more sensitive an individual is, the more they may be affected. One way to overcome the resistance of such a troglodyte is to gather crowds to perform for. To see one's neighbor be imbibed by emotion makes even the most uncultured person impressionable. So that's the end of my review for 11th Cycle, but before I end this video, I want to talk about the content warning first. And there is no better way for me to talk about the content warnings than to repeat what the author says at the beginning of the book. 11th Cycle is a story about many things and tackles subjects which many may feel uncomfortable with. It deals with disability, with mental illness, with abuse, and even descriptive sexual content. I included these matters not for the sake of it, not to simply shock with a blunt weapon, but rather to deliver the image of a raw world. The material of this book is based on is dark. It doesn't shy away from unsettling matters. However, it is about perseverance in the face of absolute hopelessness. It is about tearing down the veil and facing whatever face evil wears. It is about people living in an indifferent world which will pull no punches and finding your own path. However, I need to also take a moment and mention the late Kentaro Miura, author of Berserk. Without him, the Souls franchise may not be where it is today, and this book may never have reached your hands. But that's the end of today's video. Do let me know whether you are interested in giving this book a try or not. I fully realize that this book is not for everyone, understandably, and that is completely okay. But personally speaking, I think this book was amazing and powerful. Do tell me whether you are interested in reading this book or not. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.